I made a video before this one where I take the houses and I divide them in their 3 categories. You need that lesson to understand what I'm going to say in this one. The first thing I want you to do is to ignore the meanings in the pie slices and ignore the signs. But before you completely ignore them, let's talk about them very quickly. The meanings in these pizza slices are very superficial, very basic, and we're going to do deep dives in future videos. And the signs, we're going to take a look at what they represent in the Wheel of Life and what they mean and how it works. And we're going to cover a lot of deep lessons. But for now, I want you to just realize that Aries is always the first, Taurus is always the second, Gemini is the third, and so forth in the general basic wheel. But when you look up your chart or anyone else, this totally changes. And you can have a very different sign in the first and a second and the third and so forth. And so does everybody else. And that's why when you learn the basics of houses, you want to stare at something like what I'm showing you, the basic wheel, where it's in order. It begins with Aries and ends with Pisces. The first concept that I want you to focus on is that this represents the Wheel of Life. Now, before you get into, what each house deeply means, what the sign in the house deeply means, the planets spread all over the houses, what they mean, the delineations and the aspects, what that means, that's going to drive you nuts if you don't start with a foundation. So blank all of that out of your mind. Let's start off with the Wheel of Life. The first thing you have to understand is you're born. That's number 1. And you become a whole, complete person. You start depending on food and things they give you for nourishment, your parents or whoever's raising you, and your blankets and your clothing and your soap and your vitamins and your toothbrush and all the things you need to be a clean, healthy, functioning human. And then you start to own your own toys and your own things and your own possessions little by little in your life. And then you go to school and you start learning foundational concepts and lessons and skills. You learn to speak, you learn to be an individual thinker, you develop your personality, you learn to communicate, and so forth, right? You go to preliminary school and you have a family life. We're on step 4 now. You have a family life. Your family life, you start learning that it's more private than your public life, than school. So, your roots, your ancestors, you start listening to stories about your family and your ancestry and all of that and what you come from and what your foundation is at home, and that starts shaping you. And then you get a little older and you start to be passionate about certain things. In house number 5, you start to become more passionate about the life around you and what you love. You start to become a more interesting individual. And you start experimenting with all kinds of fun things, music and, your type of style and everything, and what makes you happy, right? But you also learn to to have fun, right? And enjoy your life. In 6th, you start learning about development and everything that affects the human body, your health and all the changes in the body. But, in 7, you fall in love. And you start understanding your romance life and what that is like for you, and then you get older, stage 8. So you start to have more growth as an adult and becoming one. And you can experience births in your family and deaths in your family and all kinds of things that form these like huge experiences in your life that change you, that transform you, that evolve you. And then you get higher learning and you start thinking about spirituality more and what it means and philosophies, and you develop your own personal beliefs. And you study and you get higher education, or you learn something on your own, or the experience from your jobs are experience as well, right? Training and things that you've put to work and all of that. And you start understanding life at a deeper level, right? At 9. 10, you start to actually achieve things yourself, and you grow financially, and you apply what you learned in the 9th in the 10th, right? Which is your career. 11, you start to form and understand your links to community long term. You start to really develop what you've done and where you're going, and how it affects you, the network that you have formed in your life, right? You live your life to the fullest. In the 12th, you have a lot of things that are put to the test, and a lot of things that you have grown you to a deeper level, a deeper understanding at your own, the real foundation of who you became spiritually, right? And at the same time, at some point, we die and we become spirits, right? So that is the wheel of life. And if you start understanding the journey, now you can look at the signs, and you can understand that first we're born into the world and we just want to live. We thrive for life. We're a bunch of cells that grow, and we become a human, and that's Aries, right? Like, hello, let's go live our life. Let's just do this. Let's grow up. And then you eat, you sleep, you grow, you have a growth spurt, and you do it the same thing the next day. And there you go, on and on. So Aries. And then Taurus, let's stop and experience a little bit. I like that food. It made me comfortable. I want to watch a movie. I want to enjoy, right? So Taurus learns to, establish yourself in the world around you. So we'll get into more how the signs have their own, effect on the wheel of life. Okay, so that gives you a concept. Now let's go further. Now let's bring in some deep astrology here, but not too deep, because that's going to be for other lessons. Let's start learning the houses now. You understand the wheel of life. Let's look at the houses deeper. All right, so now now that you understand the wheel of life, now let's understand the houses and how they work. So you're gonna have to dart your attention to the first video that I made, where you see, what maps with what. So the cadent houses are more exhausted. They're the ones solving things and working the hardest. So, we'll get into that later, but you have to understand the relationship. That's why I said, if you print out your birth chart and you color code all the cadent houses, succeeding houses, angular houses, and you have 3 colors, and start observing things, you're going to understand. So let's get the wheel of life in a different way now. Now that I told you, the wheel of life, the story of the development. Let's look at it with a different perspective. So the first house, like I said, is your body, and it's what's seen the most. But notice how this is very seen, and over here on the 6th, it's hidden from the view. It's hidden in view, so you don't really see what's here. So this is the house of hidden enemies as well. Now, there's other houses that show some of that too, but we'll get into little nooks and crannies later. When you look at the houses and you understand the relationship that they have angularly to each other, you start to understand the foundation before you understand delineations and things like that, rulership and all of those things. So if you're looking for things happening at your job, you're going to look at the 10th. If you're looking for things happening with your siblings or your best friends, you're going to look at the 3rd. If you're going to look at things going on with family, you're going to look at the 4th. If you're looking at things happening in your marriage, you're going to look at the 7th, and so on and so forth. So there are certain houses where you look for specific themes and certain things. Remember that when you read a chart, natal astrology is different than horoscope astrology. Remember that a chart has to be plotted for what you're looking for, because if not, you're going to be very confused. And everything has layers and layers. So that's why my lessons are building block upon building block, so that you can insert lesson with lesson. Now, when you look at this wheel of life, you're going to look at the way that a human body, that the human body develops and lives, but you're also going to look at how the houses speak to each other. Before we get into aspects and planets and all of that, you can see the relationship. Like the 10th is the most public part of your life, and the 4th is the most private part of your life. And look how they are. One is out and about on the top, and the other one is very quiet and hidden, like under the water, under the surface, see? So it's not necessarily like that, because, you don't go by dividing it half, the top and bottom, not in this case. We'll talk